It's been 50 years since I discovered my husband was cheating on me with a woman everyone thought was dead. What I didn't know was that this would be just the beginning of the nightmare. Hello, my name is Dorothy Fields. I'm 78 years old today, and I'm going to tell you a story I've never had the courage to share until now. Before I begin, I'd like to ask you to like this video and subscribe to the Grandma's Diary if you haven't already. Also, please tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It's comforting to know that after keeping this pain inside for so long, I can finally share it with people who understand. It was 1973, and I was just 26 years old. We lived in Pine Creek, a town so small it barely appeared on maps. One of those places where everyone knows everyone, where gossip travels faster than rainwater. My husband Richard worked as an accountant at the town hall, and I took care of our home and taught sewing classes to the neighborhood girls. We had a simple life, but I felt blessed. I believed the love we shared was genuine, the kind that withstands time and difficulties. We met when I was only 17 at a church summer fair. Richard was 5 years older and had a calm way of speaking that enchanted me. We married after a year of dating, and my parents, who had passed away, would have been proud to see their daughter with such a respectable man. If only they knew what was to come. Our routine was the same every day. Richard left early for work and returned at 6 in the evening. We had dinner together, sometimes listened to the radio, and on Sundays we went to church. I dreamed of having children, but after 9 years of marriage they never came. The doctor said there was nothing wrong with me, but couldn't explain why. Over time, I learned to accept that it would be just the two of us. It was on a Tuesday in April when everything began to change. The sky was cloudy, and a light drizzle was falling when that old, noisy bus stopped in the town square. I was at Mr. Oswald's grocery store buying sugar to make a cake when I saw a woman get off. Unlike anyone who had ever passed through Pine Creek, she wore a navy blue dress, simple but elegant, the kind you only saw in magazines from the city. She had coal-black hair cut at shoulder length, which was considered daring for our conservative town. But what drew the most attention were her eyes, dark, deep, as if they held secrets no one would ever discover. "Who is that?" I asked Mrs. Nelson, who was beside me. "I have no idea, but she must be lost. Nobody comes to Pine Creek unless they have relatives here." But she wasn't lost. In fact, she seemed to know exactly where she was going. She walked with a small suitcase down Main Street and entered the only hotel in town, which was actually just the house of Widow Carmela, who rented rooms. In the following days, the entire town talked about her. She introduced herself as Sarah Martin. Some people said she was the widow of a diplomat. Others said she had been a circus performer. To the priest, she confided that she came from a traditional family in Boston and was recovering from a lung disease. To Mr. Oswald at the grocery store, she claimed she had been a university professor. To me, when we met at the Sunday market, she said she was a writer looking for inspiration in a small town. "What kind of books do you write?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Stories about people who aren't who they appear to be," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. There was something about her that bothered me, but I couldn't define what. Perhaps it was the way she quickly got close to people, or how she extracted information without revealing anything concrete about herself. In less than 2 weeks, Sarah already knew the secrets of half the town. She knew who owed what to whom, which marriages were in crisis, which young people were planning to escape to the city. She rented a small house on Church Street with money that no one knew where it came from. She didn't work, didn't receive visitors, didn't talk about family. She just observed, smiled, and told different stories about her past to each person she spoke with. And then I noticed how Richard looked at her. At first, they were just furtive glances during church charity dinners. Then conversations that seemed to extend longer than necessary when they met in the square. Richard had never been a man of many words, but with Sarah, he seemed to have endless topics. "She's interesting, isn't she?" he asked me one night while brushing his teeth. "Interesting how?" I returned the question, feeling a tightness in my chest. "Different. She's lived in places we only see in photographs. She knows stories that seem like they're from movies. I swallowed hard and pretended his comment didn't bother me. After all, we were a solid couple. We had been together for almost a decade. A stranger wouldn't change that, right? 3 months after her arrival, Sarah began complaining of chest pains. "It's my heart," she would tell people who asked why she looked paler and thinner. "It's always been fragile." The town doctor, Dr. Reynolds, visited her regularly. Once, I found him leaving her house with a worried expression. "How is she, doctor?" I asked, feigning genuine interest when, in truth, I wanted to understand what attracted people so much to this woman. "Not well, Mrs. Fields. Her heart? I've never seen anything like it. She needs a specialist, but she refuses to go to the city." And then, on a Wednesday in July, exactly 96 days after her arrival, the news spread. Sarah had been found dead in her bed by her neighbor, Mrs. Carmela, who brought fresh bread every morning. "It was her heart," said Dr. Reynolds, but his voice didn't sound convinced. "Natural causes," he wrote on the death certificate. The funeral was held the following morning, hurried and simple. There was no family to be notified, no distant relative to claim the body, just a small group of curious residents and the priest, who said a brief mass. Richard insisted on attending, despite our having an important commitment that day, the celebration of Aunt Zulmira's 80th birthday. "We need to pay our respects," he said, with a seriousness that frightened me. She had no one in the world. I agreed, but felt something strange in the way he looked at the simple coffin, as if he wanted to memorize every detail. I also noticed the absence of tears in his eyes. There was no sadness, just an intensity I had never seen before. At the cemetery, as the coffin was lowered into the ground, I thought that strange chapter of our lives had ended. The mysterious woman who appeared out of nowhere had departed in the same way, leaving only unanswered questions and contradictory stories. I couldn't have been more wrong. In the days that followed, Richard changed. First, it was small things. He came home later from work. He was distant during dinner. He wouldn't look me in the eyes when we talked. Then, he started having trouble sleeping. I would find him at dawn sitting on the porch, staring at nothing. "What's wrong, Richard?" I asked one of those nights. "Are you worried about something?" "It's nothing," he replied. "I just can't stop thinking about how fragile life is, how someone can be here today and simply disappear tomorrow." I believed he was having some kind of existential crisis. After all, no one in our town had died so suddenly in years. Sarah's death, however mysterious, had reminded us of our own mortality. But a week after the funeral, Richard left the house at night, saying he needed to take care of something at work. He returned after midnight, smelling of cigarettes — he never smoked — and with dirt on his shoes. The next morning I found a receipt for flowers in his jacket. "Did you buy flowers for someone?" I asked casually during breakfast. He hesitated for a second, then replied, "For Sarah's grave. I stopped by yesterday. It looked so abandoned." That bothered me. Why would my husband be bringing flowers to the grave of a woman we barely knew? But I swallowed the question along with the bitter coffee. Perhaps it was just kindness, I thought. Richard always had a soft heart. But then he began visiting the grave regularly, once a week, then twice, then almost every night. He would leave wearing cologne and the shirt I had ironed with extra care, the one he only wore on special occasions. "Why do you dress up so much to go to the cemetery?" I finally asked, unable to hide the suspicion in my voice. "Respect, Dorothy. It's a matter of respect." But it wasn't respect I saw in his eyes as he prepared to leave. It was anxiety, anticipation, like a young man before his first date. And when he returned hours later, there was a satisfaction on his face that I hadn't seen in years in our marriage. That's when the doubts began to eat away at me from the inside. Were they just visits to a grave, or was there something more that I wasn't seeing? But how could there be anything more? Sarah was dead, buried, just a memory in the minds of Pine Creek residents. Or not. Richard's visits to the cemetery became more frequent and longer. August arrived with a suffocating heat, the kind that silences even the cicadas. And with it came an even deeper change in my husband's behavior. One night I woke up alone in bed. The clock showed 3 a.m. Richard's side was empty, the sheets cold. I got up, frightened, and walked through the house in the dim light. No sign of him. The car wasn't in the garage. A middle-of-the-night trip to visit a grave. It made no sense at all. I went back to bed, but sleep had already gone. I lay looking at the ceiling, feeling a knot in my throat that grew with each minute. When the sky began to lighten, I heard the car. I pretended to be asleep. I felt the mattress sink with his weight, and even with my eyes closed, I could smell the woman's perfume on his clothes. The same perfume Sarah used to wear. "Where were you?" I asked the next morning while serving his coffee. "I had insomnia. I went for a drive to clear my head." "Until 3 a.m.? He looked at me in surprise, perhaps not expecting that I knew the exact time of his absence. "I ended up falling asleep in the car near the river. I needed to think. Think. That was always the excuse, but I knew there was more. The smell of perfume, the wrinkled clothes, the way he avoided my gaze. After almost 10 years of marriage, I knew every expression, every gesture, every silence. And everything told me that Richard was lying. In the days that followed, I began to notice other details. Objects that changed places in the house. A red lipstick I found fallen behind the sofa. I never wore red lipstick. A dark blue silk scarf under the car seat. Small clues that alone might not mean anything, but together formed a disturbing mosaic. "Richard, I need to ask you something," I said one night as he prepared for another of his outings. "What is it?" he replied, adjusting his tie in the mirror without looking at me. "Are you seeing someone else?" He stopped. For a moment, I saw his face in the reflection pale. Then, slowly, he turned to me with an expression that mixed surprise and indignation. "How can you think that, Dorothy? We've been together for almost 10 years. You're the only woman in my life." In that instant, I almost believed him. Almost. But there was something in his eyes, a fleeting shadow, that told me those words were empty. "Then why do you go out every night? Why do you come back smelling of perfume that isn't mine? Why did I find this in the car?" I showed him the blue scarf. He took it from my hands, examined it as if he had never seen it before. "It must be from some client at the office. Sometimes I give rides to people from town hall. You're imagining things, Dorothy." Maybe I was. Maybe the loneliness, the frustrated dream of being a mother, and Sarah's mysterious arrival and departure had affected my mind more than I admitted. I decided to give one more chance. Not to him, but to myself. I needed concrete evidence before making any accusations. The next morning, after Richard left for work, I went to the dresser where he kept his documents. Among town hall papers and old letters, I found a small black notebook I had never seen before. Inside, page after page with his handwriting, notes, thoughts, reflections, a diary. I hesitated. Invading my husband's privacy this way was wrong, but suspicion had already taken deep roots in my heart. I began to read. The first pages were trivial, comments about work, about the weather, about plans for the future. But then her name began to appear. Sarah, on each page, more frequent, more intimate. Today I saw her for the first time. There's something about her I can't explain, as if we already knew each other from another life. S told me about New York today, the places she knew, the people she met. How I wish I could see the world through her eyes. Is what I'm feeling wrong? I try to fight against it, but each day it gets harder. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. The last notes were from just a few weeks ago, after her supposed death. The plan is underway. If all goes well, soon we'll be together for real. Far from here, far from everyone, just the two of us. Today I was almost discovered. D asked questions. I need to be more careful. The empty grave looks so real. No one suspects. No one, except us, knows the truth. Empty grave. The words hit me like a slap. Sarah wasn't dead. It had all been an act. The rushed funeral, the closed coffin, the hesitant doctor. It all made sense now. But why? What was the purpose of faking her own death? I put the diary back exactly where I found it and spent the rest of the day trying to process what I had discovered. My husband wasn't just cheating on me. He was complicit in some elaborate charade. The question was, what would I do with this information? That night, when Richard said he was going to visit the grave, I just nodded silently. As soon as he left, I put on a simple dress, tied my hair under a scarf, and took the bus that passed near our house. I wasn't going to the cemetery. I knew now that wasn't where he was going. But where then? I got off in the town center and waited. 20 minutes later, I saw his car pass. It was dark, but the streetlight illuminated his concentrated face at the wheel. I caught another bus that followed in the same direction. My heart was beating so hard, I was sure the other 3 people on the vehicle could hear it. Richard's car took the road leading to the neighboring town, Riverdale, but before reaching it, he turned onto a dirt road nearly invisible among the trees. The bus continued forward. I got off at the next stop and walked back, moving along the roadside, hiding whenever I saw headlights approaching. The dirt road was long and winding, illuminated only by the crescent moon. After walking for almost half an hour, I saw a light between the trees, a small yellow house, isolated with a wooden porch. Richard's car was parked in front. I approached carefully, trying not to make noise. The windows were lit, but the curtains were closed. I circled the house until I found a gap where I could see inside. The room was simple, with few pieces of furniture, and there they were. Richard standing in the middle of the room, holding a bouquet of flowers, and her, Sarah, very much alive, smiling at him as if the world outside didn't exist. She wore a red dress that enhanced her pale skin and black hair. She looked different, thinner, her hair shorter, but it was unmistakably her. I watched, paralyzed, as they embraced, kissed, talked animatedly. They seemed happy, complicit, as if they shared the greatest secret in the world. And in fact, they did. I don't know how long I stood there, watching my life crumble through that window. The light rain that began to fall brought me back to reality. I was soaked, trembling, not just from cold, but from a toxic mixture of anger, pain, and humiliation. I returned home on the last bus, went to the bathroom, and vomited until there was nothing left in my stomach. Then I took a hot shower, so hot that my skin turned red. I wanted to wash away not just the dirt from the road, but the feeling of having been made a fool for so long. When Richard arrived 2 hours later, I was in bed, pretending to sleep. He entered the room on tiptoe, lay down beside me, and in minutes was sleeping soundly. How could he sleep so peacefully beside the woman he had just betrayed? How could he breathe so serenely after all the lies he had built? The next morning, I prepared breakfast as usual. I served him eggs and toast. I smiled when he gave me a kiss on the forehead before leaving for work. He didn't notice anything different. He didn't realize that my smile didn't reach my eyes, that my hands trembled slightly, holding the cup, that I was no longer the same Dorothy. I spent the entire week like this, living a lie within his lie, observing him, studying him, trying to understand how it had come to this. At night, while he slept, I looked at his relaxed face and wondered, who is this man with whom I've shared my bed for almost 10 years? Did I ever really know him? The questions accumulated, but one certainty grew in my chest. I wouldn't be just another victim in this story. I wouldn't be the betrayed wife who cries silently while her husband has fun with his lover. I wouldn't be reduced to an object of pity for the neighbors, friends, the entire town. And so I began to plan. If Sarah could fake her own death and deceive an entire town, I could create my own version of the truth. If Richard could live a double life, I could show that I knew how to play this game too. First, I needed to better understand who Sarah really was. Not the mysterious woman who had enchanted our small town, but the real person behind the mask. And for that, I needed help. My childhood friend Judy worked at the telephone exchange. If there was someone who could discover information about a person without raising suspicions, it was her. One afternoon, while Richard was at work, I went to visit her. "Judy, I need to tell you something, but you have to promise it will stay just between us." She looked at me with concern. We had been friends since we were 7 years old. We had shared all our secrets, all our sorrows, all our joys. "Of course, Dorothy, you know you can trust me." And then I told her everything. Sarah's arrival, the changes in Richard, the fake death, the yellow house on the road to Riverdale. With each word, I saw Judy's eyes widen more. "My God, Dorothy, this sounds like something from a movie. Are you sure you're not imagining it?" "I'm absolutely sure. I saw it with my own eyes. And I need to find out who this woman really is, Judy. I need to know who I'm dealing with." Judy hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'll help you. But what do you plan to do when you find out?" I looked out the window, at the small square where children played under the watchful eye of their mothers, at the normal world that continued turning while mine collapsed. "I don't know yet, but I won't be just a victim in this story, Judy. That I promise." 3 days later, Judy appeared at my house with an envelope. Inside were newspaper clippings from distant towns. They all talked about a woman, sometimes called Sarah, sometimes Helen, sometimes Claire, who arrived in small communities, got close to married men, and then disappeared with money, jewelry, or documents. "She's a con artist, Dorothy. She's been doing this for years, changing her name, her appearance, but the method is always the same." I looked at the photos in the newspapers. In all of them, despite the differences in hair, makeup, posture, the eyes were the same, those dark, deep eyes that seemed to see through people. And what about the fake death? Has she done that before? At least twice that I could discover, in Oakwood and in Spring Hill. In both cases, she disappeared with money from the town hall. It seems she has a contact who produces fake death certificates. Fake death certificates. Richard worked at the town hall, had access to official documents. Was he that contact, or was he just another victim of her scam? Thank you, Judy. You don't know how much this means to me. And now? What are you going to do? I looked again at the newspaper clippings, at the faces of the people who had been deceived by Sarah before me. Men, women, entire families destroyed by her passage. I'm going to do what they should have done. I'm going to reclaim my dignity. After discovering Sarah's true nature, I felt as if a veil had been removed from my eyes. Suddenly, small details that didn't make sense before fit together like pieces of a macabre puzzle. Richard's night outings, the increasingly elaborate lies, the money missing from our bank account, everything pointed to a devastating conclusion. My husband wasn't just a man in love with another woman, but a conscious accomplice in her scams. It was late August 1973, and the suffocating heat seemed to reflect the fire growing within me. It wasn't just anger or jealousy, it was a deep indignation, a feeling of having been not just betrayed, but ridiculed. While the entire town believed in the tragic death of the mysterious outsider, she and my husband laughed at our naivety in their little yellow house on the road to Riverdale. One afternoon, while cleaning Richard's home office, I found a locked metal box at the bottom of a drawer. The key was hidden inside a book on the shelf. The Great Gatsby, the novel about betrayal he had given me as a gift on our 5th wedding anniversary. The irony was almost painful. Inside the box, I found what I was looking for. Town hall documents with the official letterhead, blank papers signed by the town doctor, who I later discovered had a gambling debt to Richard, and a considerable amount of money. But what really left me speechless was a handwritten letter with the delicate handwriting I already knew from notes found in the car. My dear R, everything is ready for our departure. The money from the town hall account will be transferred next week. When everything is complete, we'll take the train to Chicago and from there to Canada, where no one knows us. I know it's difficult to leave everything behind, but think about the life we'll have together, away from this suffocating place. As for Dee, don't worry. She'll find her way, as she always has. You yourself said she's strong, stronger than she appears. Perhaps we're doing her a favor, freeing her from a marriage that no longer has love. 3 days after the transfer, I'll be waiting at the usual place. Don't be late, my love. Our new life awaits. Eternally yours, S. I read and reread those words until each one was branded in my mind like a hot iron. She'll find her way. A marriage that no longer has love. Our new life. Each phrase was a blow, each word a stab. They weren't just planning to run away together, they were going to take public money. Money that, if discovered, would put Richard in prison for years. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I closed the box, returned the key to the book. On the outside, I remained the same Dorothy as always. The dedicated wife, the friendly neighbor, the woman who smiled while preparing dinner for her husband. Inside, something had broken forever. That night, while Richard slept beside me, I did the calculations. The letter mentioned next week for the money transfer. Knowing the town hall procedures, that meant the following Friday, when the municipal employee's payment was processed. That gave me exactly 5 days to act. The next day, I asked Judy to find out which train to Chicago left our town 3 days after Friday. She didn't ask questions. Perhaps she already knew what I was planning, or perhaps she simply trusted that I knew what I was doing. The train leaves at 2:30 p.m. from the Central Station, she told me later. It's the only one that connects with the international line that day. I thanked her with a tight hug. I had everything I needed to know. On Thursday, the eve of the transfer, Richard came home later than usual. He seemed tense, distracted. He barely touched the food I had prepared with such care. "Is everything okay at work?" I asked, feigning innocence. Yes, just a bit tired. Tomorrow is payday. There's a lot of paperwork to organize." Paperwork? Was that how he referred to the embezzlement of public funds he was about to commit? The ease with which he now lied impressed me. How many other lies had I swallowed over the years, believing in his sincerity? "Tomorrow I'm going to visit my aunt in Blue Hill," I announced casually while washing the dishes. "She hasn't been feeling well. I'll probably stay there until Sunday." I saw a flash of relief pass through his eyes. My absence would facilitate his plans. "Of course, dear. Send my regards." "Won't you miss me?" I asked, forcing a playful tone in my voice that threatened to break. He approached, kissed my forehead, that cold kiss that I now recognized as part of his act. "I always miss you when you're not around." One more lie for the collection. I swallowed the lump in my throat and smiled. The next morning, I packed a small suitcase with some clothes and the important documents I had kept since the beginning of our marriage. My birth certificate, our marriage certificate, the deed to the small house I inherited from my parents in Blue Hill that Richard never knew I maintained. "Have a good day at work," I said, kissing him at the door like any normal morning. "See you Sunday night." He nodded distractedly, already thinking about the day ahead, the money he would soon have in hand, the new life he planned far from here, far from me. As soon as his car disappeared around the corner, I ran to the phone and called Judy. "Is everything ready?" I asked breathlessly. "Yes, the room is prepared. You can come whenever you want." Instead of taking the bus to Blue Hill, as Richard believed I would, I went to Judy's house on the other side of town. From there, I could observe the movements at the town hall without being seen. I spent the entire day at the second-floor window, watching the comings and goings of people, waiting. Around 5 p.m., I saw Richard leave the building with a black briefcase under his arm. He walked hurriedly, looking around as if afraid of being followed. He got into the car and drove off in the direction of the road to Riverdale. "It's today," I murmured to Judy, who was beside me. "He's already taking the money to her." "Are you sure about what you're going to do, Dorothy? There's still time to change your mind." I looked at my childhood friend, at the concerned face I knew so well. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. That night, I didn't return home. I slept in Judy's guest room, planning every detail of what I would do next. It wasn't just a matter of wounded pride. It was about regaining control of my life, about not being the passive victim of a cruel scheme anymore. On Saturday morning, I put on my best dress, a light blue one that Richard always said matched my eyes. I tied my hair in an elegant bun and applied red lipstick I had never worn before. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. There was a determination in her eyes, a strength I didn't know I possessed. "I'll go with you," Judy offered. "No, this is something I need to do alone." I took a taxi to the road to Riverdale. The driver looked at me curiously. It wasn't common for a well-dressed woman to ask to be dropped off in the middle of the way, where there was nothing but trees and the dirt road that extended to the right. "Are you sure it's here, ma'am?" "Absolutely." I paid the fare and waited for the taxi to disappear around the bend before taking the dirt road. I walked slowly, feeling the August sun warm my skin. I wasn't in a hurry. Each step brought me closer to the moment that would change everything. When I finally spotted the yellow house, I paused for a moment to calm my breathing. Richard's car was parked in front, along with another I didn't recognize, probably rented by Sarah for the escape. The house seemed quiet, the curtains closed against the strong sun. I climbed the porch steps with determined steps and knocked on the door. No one answered. I knocked again, harder. I heard movements inside the house, whispered voices, hurried footsteps. Finally, the door opened, and there she was, Sarah, wearing a red dress and with her hair tied in a ponytail. For a moment, she seemed not to recognize me. Then her eyes widened in shock. "Dorothy, what are you doing here?" "I came to visit my husband," I replied calmly, entering the house without waiting for an invitation. "He is home, isn't he?" The room was a mess. Open suitcases, scattered clothes, documents on the table, preparations for a hasty departure. Richard came out of the back room, pale as a ghost when he saw me. "Dorothy, weren't you in Blue Hill?" "Clearly not," I replied, looking around. "Seems I interrupted something. Are you moving?" The silence that followed was so dense I could almost touch it. Richard and Sarah exchanged glances, trying to decide how to handle this unexpected situation. "Dorothy, I can explain," Richard began, using that conciliatory tone that always worked with me. "You don't need to. I already understand everything. The fake death, the secret meetings, the town hall money, very creative, I must admit." I saw the shock on their faces. They didn't expect me to know so much. "How?" Sarah began, but I interrupted. "How did I find out? Does that matter? What matters is that I know exactly who you are, Sarah. Or should I say Helen, or Claire, so many names, so many towns, so many victims." She took a step back, as if she had been slapped. "I don't know what you're talking about. Oakwood, Spring Hill, and now Pine Creek. Always the same trick, isn't it? Seduce a man with access to money, fake your own death to escape possible suspicions, and then flee with him and the money to the next scam." Richard was looking at me as if he had never seen me before. Perhaps he never had. He had never seen the real Dorothy, the woman who now stood before him, without fear, without submission. "The train to Chicago leaves tomorrow at 2:30 p.m., I continued. "From there to Canada, where no one knows you. A new life away from this suffocating place, as you wrote in your letter." "You went through my things?" Richard finally found his voice, indignation replacing the initial shock. I laughed, a laugh that surprised even myself, bitter, cold, humorless. "That's what worries you? That I went through your things? Not the fact that you're about to steal public money? Not the fact that you're betraying your wife of 10 years? Not the fact that you're helping a known con artist?" "You don't understand," he tried again. "We're in love. We want a chance to start over, away from here." "In love," I repeated the word as if it were foreign, incomprehensible. "And what about her? Is she in love too? Or are you just one more on her long list of foolish men?" Sarah stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with anger. "Don't speak of what you don't know. What we have is real." "As real as your death? As real as all the stories you told about your past? New York, Boston, the university professor career, the traditional family." Which one was true, Sarah? I saw something pass through her eyes, a flash of vulnerability that quickly gave way to the calculating coldness I now recognized as her true nature. What do you want, Dorothy? Money? Is that it? Do you want your share? I don't want anything from you, I replied, my voice firm despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. I just came to say that I know everything, and I won't be the only one. What do you mean by that? Richard asked, a tone of growing panic in his voice. That your story, the true story, is recorded and sealed in an envelope that will be delivered to Sheriff Sullivan tomorrow at 10 a.m. unless I call to stop it. All the details, the fake death certificate, the embezzled money, the previous scams in other towns. It was a bluff, of course. There was no envelope, but the fear in their eyes told me they had believed it. You wouldn't do that, Richard stammered. I would go to jail. Yes, you would. Deservedly so. What do you want then? Sarah asked, pragmatic as always. There must be something we can offer. I looked at the two of them, the man I once loved and the woman who had destroyed our life together. I didn't feel hatred, just a deep sadness mixed with a strange sense of freedom. I want you to disappear, not just from my life but from Pine Creek. Return the money to the town hall, all of it, and never come back. No goodbyes, no explanations, simply go away. And if we do that, Richard asked, clinging to this lifeline, then the envelope will never be delivered. You'll have your chance to start over as you so desire, just not with other people's money. Sarah laughed, a harsh sound without joy. And we should trust you? How do we know you won't report us anyway? You don't know. You'll have to trust my word, just as I trusted yours for so long. The irony wasn't lost on them. I saw Richard lower his eyes, a flash of shame finally crossing his face. You have until tomorrow, 9 a.m., I concluded, turning to leave. After that, whatever happens will be a consequence of your choices. As I walked to the door, I heard Richard's voice, almost a whisper. Dorothy, I'm sorry. I stopped, but didn't turn around. Sarah is much more alive than you ever were. That's what you once told me, remember? Well, now you're going to discover how alive I can be. And with those words, I left the yellow house, leaving behind the man who had broken my heart and the woman who had helped open my eyes. I returned to Pine Creek late that afternoon, feeling strangely light. The taxi dropped me off in the town square, where some children were still playing under the watchful eye of their mothers. No one gave me a second look. I was still just Dorothy, the wife of the town hall accountant, the discreet woman who gave sewing lessons. Little did they know that the Dorothy who returned was not the same one who had left. Instead of going home, I went directly to Judy's house. She was waiting for me on the porch, her face tense with worry. So? She asked as soon as I entered. It's done, I replied simply. That night I told her everything in detail. The confrontation, the ultimatum, the expressions of Richard and Sarah when they realized I knew everything. Judy listened in silence, nodding occasionally, her eyes never leaving mine. Do you really think they'll return the money and leave? She asked when I finished. I don't know, but I gave them a choice, something they never gave me. I slept at Judy's house again, a deep and dreamless sleep like I hadn't had in months. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was already high. What time is it? I asked, sitting up suddenly in bed. Almost 10, Judy replied, entering the room with a cup of coffee. You slept like a rock. 10 o'clock. My ultimatum had expired an hour ago. Had Richard and Sarah fulfilled their part of the agreement? Or were they at this moment fleeing with the town hall money, laughing at my naivety in believing that my bluff would be enough to stop them? I need to go to the town hall, I said, getting up hurriedly. It's Sunday, Dorothy. There's nobody there. Exactly. Half an hour later, we were standing in front of the town hall building, a white colonial mansion with blue windows that dominated one side of the main square. As expected, it was closed, the windows locked, the courtyard empty. And now, Judy asked, we don't have the key. We don't need to enter. We just need to wait. We sat on a bench in the square from where we could observe the main entrance of the town hall. The day was hot, typical of August, and the square was almost deserted, being Sunday morning. Most residents were at the 10 o'clock mass. At 11:30, an unfamiliar car parked in front of the town hall. A man got out. It wasn't Richard, but I recognized Dr. Reynolds, the town doctor. He looked nervously around before approaching the main door with a key in his hand. "Let's go," I whispered to Judy, rising from the bench. We crossed the square quickly, reaching Dr. Reynolds before he could open the door. "Dr. Reynolds?" I called, my voice calmer than I felt inside. He turned, startled. When he saw me, his face paled. "Mrs. Fields, what are you doing here?" "Probably the same as you, checking if a certain deposit was made." His eyes widened in shock. "I don't know what you're talking about," he tried, but his voice trembled. "I think you do. And I think we're here for the same reason. So why don't we go in together?" He hesitated, looking from me to Judy and back to me, as if evaluating his options. Finally, with a defeated sigh, he unlocked the door. The interior of the town hall was cool and silent, the echo of our steps reverberating through the empty corridors. We followed Dr. Reynolds to the upper floor, where the treasurer's office and the municipal safe were located. "They told me you knew, Dr. C." Reynolds murmured as he opened the door with another key. "They said they had an agreement." "And we do. They return the money, I keep quiet." The treasurer's office was small and austere, a desk, some files, and in the corner, a safe built into the wall. Dr. Reynolds approached it, turned the dial several times, and the heavy metal door opened. Inside were several organized stacks of money, documents, and some small valuable objects. Dr. Reynolds pointed to a thick envelope on top of one of the piles. "It's all there. They asked me to check and then close the safe as if nothing had happened." "And the fake death certificate?" He swallowed hard, clearly uncomfortable. "They also left this." He extended another, thinner envelope. "It's a letter confessing that I collaborated. They said you would know what to do with it." I took the envelope, feeling its insignificant weight in my hands. A piece of paper that could destroy a man's career and life. "Why did you do this, doctor? Why did you help with that whole charade?" Dr. Reynolds lowered his eyes, the shame visible in every line of his face. "Gambling debts. Richard found out somehow, and he offered to settle everything if I helped. It was just signing a paper. I thought it wouldn't hurt anyone. But it did. I know that now, and I'm ready to face the consequences if that's what you decide." I looked at the envelope in my hands, then at the broken man in front of me. Dr. Reynolds wasn't a bad man. He was weak, perhaps easily manipulated, but not cruel. And in the end, he had done the right thing, coming to return the money as promised. "We all make mistakes, doctor," I said finally, tearing the envelope into small pieces. "The important thing is how we choose to correct them." The relief on his face was immediate and profound. "Thank you, Mrs. Fields. I don't know how—" "Don't thank me. Just make sure this never happens again." After confirming that all the money was indeed in the safe, we left the town hall as discreetly as we had entered. Dr. Reynolds left in his car, and Judy and I walked back to her house in silence. "What are you going to do now?" she asked when we were sitting on the porch, drinking lemonade to alleviate the midday heat. "Now," I replied, watching the slow movement of the town on the lazy Sunday, "I'm going to disappear." The next morning, Monday, I did exactly what I had planned. I left the house before Richard woke up, leaving only a simple note on the kitchen table. "I know you fulfilled your part of the agreement. Now I'm fulfilling mine. Don't look for me." I took the 7 o'clock bus to Blue Hill, where the small house I inherited from my parents awaited me, closed for years but still mine. I brought only a suitcase with essential clothes and the important documents I had already set aside. The rest could stay behind, along with the life that was no longer mine. The house in Blue Hill was simple but welcoming. 2 bedrooms, a small living room, kitchen, and a backyard with a cherry tree that my father had planted when I was born. It was dusty and had a musty smell, but nothing that couldn't be resolved with a day of cleaning. As I opened the windows to let in light and air, I thought about Richard. Was he at this moment discovering my absence, reading my short and direct note, feeling relief or despair? Part of me wanted to know, but another part, the stronger part, the one that had emerged in recent weeks, knew it no longer mattered. What Richard felt or didn't feel was no longer the center of my world. I spent the following days reorganizing the house and myself. I cleaned, tidied up, threw away what no longer served. It was as if I were doing the same with my life, discarding what was broken or worn out, keeping only the essential, what really mattered. On the third day, the neighbor next door, Mrs. Gertrude, knocked on the door with a still warm cornbread. "I heard you had returned," she said with a frank smile. "Welcome back, child." Child. I was 26 years old, had been married for almost 10 years. But for Mrs. Gertrude, who had known my parents and watched me grow up, I would always be little Dorothy. "Thank you, Mrs. Gertrude. It's good to be back. Are you staying long?" "Actually, I think I came to stay." She looked at me curiously, but didn't ask more questions. In Blue Hill, unlike Pine Creek, people respected others' space. If I wanted to tell my story, I would do so in my own time. A week after my departure, Judy came to visit. She brought with her not only news from Pine Creek, but also my sewing machine and some fabrics I had left behind. "Richard is desperate," she told me, as we had coffee on the porch. "He went to the police station, searched hospitals, asked about you at every house in town. No one knows where you are, except me, and I don't intend to tell." And Sarah disappeared completely. Some say they saw her boarding the train to Chicago alone, but no one is sure. It's as if she never existed. I nodded, not surprised. Sarah was an expert at appearing and disappearing without leaving traces. It was her modus operandi, after all. And the town hall money? Did anyone discover anything? No. Everything seems normal. Whatever you did, it worked. I looked at my friend, feeling a wave of gratitude for her unwavering loyalty. I didn't do anything but give them a choice. In the days that followed, I began to make plans for my future in Blue Hill. The house needed repairs, and my savings wouldn't last forever. I needed to find a way to earn money. That's when I remembered the sewing classes I used to give in Pine Creek. I had always had a knack with needle and thread, and the young women in town came to me to learn how to make their own dresses, curtains, tablecloths. Why not do the same here? I put a small ad in the local grocery store. Sewing classes and custom clothing. Ask for Mrs. Dorothy at 17 Acacia Street. At first, only 2 curious young women came, then 3 more. By the 3rd week, I had a group of 10 students of different ages, all eager to learn the craft that could give them independence. As I taught them how to hem, sew on buttons, take measurements, I felt useful in a way I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer just Richard's wife, the woman whose identity was tied to her husband. I was Dorothy, the seamstress, the teacher, the woman who had rebuilt her life with her own hands. A month after my arrival, I received a letter from Richard. I immediately recognized his handwriting on the envelope. For a moment, I considered throwing it away without opening it, but something inside me, curiosity perhaps, or just the need for closure, made me tear the seal. "Dear Dorothy, I don't know if this letter will reach you, but I have to try. I looked for you everywhere I could think of, until Judy finally, after much insistence, told me you were well, but she didn't tell me where. I want you to know that I fulfilled my part of the agreement. The money was returned in full, and Sarah, she's gone. Where to? I don't know, nor do I want to know. The spell she cast over me seems to have broken the moment you entered that house and confronted us with the truth. I would like to say I was deceived, manipulated, that I didn't know what I was doing, but that would be one more lie, and I've told too many lies already. The truth is that I was weak, selfish, and foolish. I let myself be carried away by promises of a different life, of emotions that our marriage in its comfortable routine no longer provided. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, not just for what I did, but for what I failed to do, value the extraordinary woman I was lucky enough to marry. Wherever you are, I hope you found the peace and happiness you deserve. Always yours, Richard. I read the letter 3 times, trying to feel something. Anger, sadness, any emotion that would tell me these words still had power over me. But all I felt was a strange sense of closure, as if a long and painful chapter of a book had finally come to an end. I carefully folded the letter and put it in the dresser drawer along with other documents from the past. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been said in that yellow house on the day I finally found my voice. 2 weeks later, I received another unexpected visit. It was Dr. Reynolds, the doctor from Pine Creek, looking nervous and out of place on my porch. "Mrs. Fields," he began, hat in hand, "I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all, doctor. What brings you to Blue Hill?" "I came to bring news that I thought you would like to know." I invited him in and offered coffee, which he accepted gratefully. Sitting at the kitchen table, he finally revealed the reason for his visit. Richard left Pine Creek yesterday. He resigned from the town hall and departed on the morning train. He said he was going to start over somewhere where no one knew him. The news didn't surprise me as much as it might have. Pine Creek was too small to contain Richard's secrets and shame. "Thank you for letting me know, doctor, but I confess I don't know how this affects me now." He nodded understandingly. "I imagined you would say that, but there's more. Before leaving, he asked me to deliver this to you if I ever discovered your whereabouts." He handed me a thick envelope. Inside, I found legal papers. Richard had transferred to my name the house in Pine Creek, the car, and a considerable amount of money he kept in a bank account I didn't know about. "He said it was the least he could do," Dr. Reynolds explained. "He said he didn't deserve anything of what you had built together." I looked at the documents, feeling a mixture of emotions I couldn't name. It wasn't money I wanted from Richard. It never was. But there was something symbolically just about that final gesture. "What do you plan to do?" Dr. Reynolds asked. I looked around at the small sunlit kitchen, at the backyard where the cherry tree was beginning to bloom, at the table where my students gathered every afternoon to learn a craft that would give them independence. "I'm going to continue living, Doctor." That's what we always do in the end. When Dr. Reynolds left, I stayed on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. I thought about Pine Creek, about Richard, about Sarah, about all the pain and betrayal that had brought me here. And for the first time, I felt nothing but gratitude, because without that pain, I would never have discovered my own strength. I would never have learned that I could lose everything, husband, home, status, security, and still survive. Not just survive, but rebuild. Not just rebuild, but flourish. Like the cherry tree my father planted, whose deep roots kept it firm even in the most violent storms. I too had roots that Richard, Sarah, and all the others couldn't see. But that sustained me when everything else collapsed. And so it was, on that porch in Blue Hill, at 26 years old, that I truly began to live. Not as someone's wife, not as the victim of a deception, but as Dorothy. Just Dorothy, whole in herself. 50 years have passed since those days in Blue Hill. Half a century since I chose to be reborn from the ashes of a marriage destroyed by lies. That young 26-year-old Dorothy, betrayed and humiliated, became the woman I am today. A 78-year-old lady with wrinkles that tell stories, hands calloused from work with needle and thread, and a heart that learned that the deepest wounds, when healed, can transform into the source of our greatest strength. The first years in Blue Hill were of silent reconstruction. My sewing classes prospered beyond what I could have imagined. What began with a few curious young women transformed into an informal school that attracted women from all neighboring towns. I taught them more than just sewing. I taught them that their dreams could be woven with their own hands, that independence was a dress that fit everyone. In 1975, 2 years after my arrival, I used the money Richard had left me to buy an empty store on Main Street. I painted the facade light blue, installed large windows so natural light would flood the interior, and hung a simple sign, Dorothy's Atelier, Fashion and Sewing. It was a clear risk. The women of Blue Hill and surroundings weren't accustomed to buying custom-made clothes. Most sewed at home or used ready-made pieces from the larger stores in the city. But there was something about the idea of unique pieces created especially for each body, each personality, that captured their imagination. It started with party dresses, graduations, weddings, important birthdays. Then came personalized school uniforms, work clothes, baby layettes. Each piece that left my atelier carried a small golden button in the inner seam. My discreet signature, my way of saying, "A woman who was reborn made this for you." In 1977, I hired my first employees, 3 former students who had stood out not just for their talent with the needle, but for their dedication to the craft. We pooled our savings and bought industrial sewing machines, which allowed us to increase production without sacrificing quality. For the first time, I saw myself not just as a craftswoman, but as a businesswoman. It was during this time that I met Michael, a 40-year-old widower who had a carpentry shop across the street. He made the special hangers for the atelier, the wooden mannequins, the shelves that displayed our imported fabrics. At first, our relationship was strictly professional, punctuated by brief conversations about the weather or town events. But then, on a rainy June afternoon, he appeared at the atelier after closing time. I was alone doing the day's accounting when I heard the soft knock on the door. Michael was drenched, holding a package protected under his coat. "Sorry to show up like this," he said, raindrops running down his face. "But I finished this today and thought you might like to see it." The package contained a sewing box, the most beautiful I had ever seen, made of 3 different types of wood with compartments perfectly sized for spools, needles, scissors, and buttons, and a lid with my name carved in delicate letters. "It's extraordinary," I murmured, running my fingers over the carving. "Like you," he replied, and then, seeming embarrassed by his own boldness, added, "Your work, I mean. What you do with fabrics and threads is extraordinary." I invited him for coffee to dry off and warm up before going home. 1 coffee became 2, and the conversation extended into the night. We talked about our childhoods, our passion for crafts, the dreams we still had. He told me about his wife, Mary, who had died of pneumonia 5 years earlier, leaving him with a 12-year-old son. I told him about Richard. Not all the sordid details, but enough for him to understand that I too carried scars. "I think we all break at some point," he said, looking at his hands calloused from working with wood. "The question is, with what glue do we choose to mend ourselves?" That night was the beginning of something I hadn't planned, hadn't sought, but that blossomed naturally, like the cherry tree in the yard. Michael and I became friends, then confidants, and finally, very slowly, something more. Our romance was discreet, respectful, built on a foundation of mutual admiration and shared understanding of the pain of loss. His son, Peter, initially looked at me with suspicion, which was understandable. Loyalty to a mother he barely remembered manifested as resistance to any woman who might take her place. I didn't try to force a connection. I didn't try to be a substitute. Instead, I invited him to the atelier. I showed him how the sewing machines worked. I taught him to distinguish different types of fabric just by touch. To my surprise, he was interested. He had an eye for colors and patterns, an aesthetic sensitivity he had inherited from his mother, who had been an amateur painter. At 15, Peter was already designing models that we incorporated into our collections. At 17, I convinced him to enroll in a fashion design course in the city. Michael and I married in 1980 in a simple ceremony in my house's garden, our house now. It wasn't an impulsive decision. At 33, I was no longer the naive young woman who had married Richard. I knew the value of independence, the price of broken trust. Michael, at 43, also brought his own life lessons. Our love wasn't an intense, consuming flame, but a steady ember that warmed without burning. "I'm not looking for someone to complete my life," I told him the night I accepted his proposal. "My life is already complete. I'm looking for someone to share it with." "That's exactly what I want to offer," he replied. a sharing, not a fusion. In the years that followed, the atelier grew to become a reference in the region. We opened a second store in the city in 1985, specializing in wedding dresses and clothes for special occasions. Peter, after graduating in design, joined the business, bringing a contemporary vision that complemented my more traditional approach. In 1989, when Blue Hill celebrated its centennial, I was invited to create the costumes for the historical parade, a recognition of the impact my work had had on the community. 50 models paraded down Main Avenue, each representing a decade of the town's history, each created in my atelier. It was during the preparations for this celebration that I received an unexpected letter. The envelope had a foreign stamp, Uruguay, and the handwriting was unfamiliar. Inside, I found 2 pages of thin paper covered by a delicate feminine handwriting. Dear Mrs. Fields, my name is Eliza Mendez, and until recently, I was known as Sarah Martin. I don't expect your forgiveness, nor do I intend to justify what I did to you and to so many others over the years. I am writing because, after a life of deceiving and manipulating, I recently found myself confronted with my own mortality in a way I cannot fake or escape. I've been diagnosed with terminal cancer. The doctors give me 6 months at most. It's strange how the prospect of true death makes us reflect on the deaths we've faked. I want you to know that after leaving Pine Creek, I continued my path of destruction for a few more years. Until, in 1978, I met a man who saw through me in a way no one ever had, not even you who discovered my scheme. He saw not just the fraud, but the broken woman behind the fraud, the abandoned girl who grew up believing that deceiving was the only way to survive. Instead of reporting me, he offered me a choice, as you did that day in the Yellow House. But his choice came with something that yours, understandably, couldn't offer: unconditional love. I married him, abandoned my false names, my invented identities. I became Eliza, my true name. And for 15 years I've lived a life I never imagined possible. Honest, quiet, anchored in truth, instead of built on lies. I don't deserve the peace I found. I know that. But perhaps that's the greatest mystery of life. We receive not what we deserve, but what is given to us by grace or chance. I heard through mutual acquaintances that you prospered after our separation, that you built a respected business, that you remarried, that you found happiness. I cannot express the relief I felt in knowing this. Not because it eases my conscience, nothing could do that completely, but because it means that somehow the universe balanced the scales that my actions unbalanced. As for Richard, I don't know what became of him. Our paths separated that same night you confronted us. He headed north. I went south. The plan we had to flee together died the moment you opened that door and showed the strength that neither he nor I knew you possessed. I'm not asking for a response to this letter. In fact, it might be better if you don't respond. I just wanted you to know that among all the people I hurt in my previous life, you are the one I regret the most. Not just for what I did, but for what I almost prevented you from becoming. With respect and repentance, Eliza, formerly Sarah. I read the letter several times, sitting in the small office at the back of the atelier. I tried to feel anger, resentment, any remnant of the hatred I once nurtured for that woman. But all I found was a strange sense of closure, as if a circle that began to be traced decades ago had finally been completed. I didn't respond to the letter, as she herself suggested. Perhaps it was better that way. But that night, sitting on the porch with Michael, I told him the whole story, the details I had omitted before, the most painful and shameful parts. He listened in silence, holding my hand in his. You know what's strangest? I said when I finished. I feel grateful to her. Grateful? He asked, surprised. If it weren't for Sarah, for all that pain, I would never have discovered what I'm capable of. I would never have built this life, this business. I would never have met you, Peter, everything I have now. Michael smiled, that gentle smile that was the first thing I noticed about him. That's what differentiates us from those who hurt us, he said. the capacity to transform pain into gratitude. Time continued its inexorable course. The atelier grew to become a small company with 30 employees. Peter married Laura, one of my apprentices, and they had 2 daughters who filled our house with laughter and new possibilities. Michael, my safe harbor for 20 years, departed peacefully in 2000, victim of a heart attack while working in his carpentry shop. The pain was deep but different from what I felt with Richard. It wasn't mixed with humiliation or betrayal, just the clean and honest grief of true loss. In 2010, at 63, I passed the direction of the atelier to Peter and his new ideas. I didn't retire completely. I still showed up every day, advised special clients, created pieces for important occasions, but the day-to-day business was in younger and equally capable hands. It was in that same year that I received another unexpected visit. I was at the atelier adjusting a wedding dress for a young client when the bell above the door rang. An elderly man entered, leaning on a cane, his hair completely white, his face marked by time, but still recognizable. Richard. Almost 4 decades had passed since our last encounter. The young town hall accountant, with his dreams of escape and his weakness for mysterious women, had transformed into a frail old man whose eyes still carried the weight of old choices. "Dorothy," he said, his voice trembling, "sorry to show up like this. I heard about your success, your atelier. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. I asked the bride and the assistant to give us a moment. I led Richard to the small garden in the back, where we kept a table and chairs for summer days. You look beautiful," he said as he sat down with difficulty. "Time has been generous to you." "Time has nothing to do with it," I replied. "It's the choices we make that determine how we age." He nodded, accepting the indirect without protest. "You've built something incredible here. I always knew you had talent, but this," he gestured toward the atelier, "is impressive. What brings you here after so long, Richard?" He lowered his eyes, studying his own age-spotted hands. "I'm dying, Dorothy. Lung cancer, terminal stage. I didn't come to ask for anything, not forgiveness, not reconciliation. I just wanted to see you one last time, to tell you that you were right." "Right about what?" "About everything. About being more alive than I ever imagined. About rebuilding your life from nothing. About being strong when it seemed impossible." I looked at that broken man, not by disease but by the weight of his own choices, and felt a wave of compassion I hadn't expected. "What happened to you, Richard, after Pine Creek?" He then told me about the years that followed our separation, how he wandered from town to town, working temporary jobs, never really settling anywhere. How he married twice more, but never found the stability we had. How in the last 15 years he had worked as an accountant in a small factory in Chicago, living a modest and anonymous life. "I never found another Sarah, thank God," he said with a sad smile. "But I also never found another Dorothy." When he finished his story, we sat in silence for a long moment, only the sound of birds and the distant buzz of the atelier filling the air. "You know what's ironic?" I finally said. "That betrayal, all that pain, was the best thing that could have happened to me." "How so?" "It forced me to find a strength I didn't know I had. It taught me that I could lose everything, husband, security, status, and still survive. Not just survive, but thrive." Richard nodded slowly. "I always suspected that in the end, even without wanting to, I had liberated you instead of destroying you." I offered him tea, which he accepted with gratitude. We talked for another hour, not as ex-husband and ex-wife, not as betrayer and betrayed, but as 2 travelers who had traveled very different paths and now met briefly to share road stories. When he rose to leave, leaning heavily on his cane, I asked, "Did you ever see her again? Sarah?" "No," he replied, looking at the horizon. "But I received a letter from her many years ago from Uruguay. She was dying too." I didn't tell him that I had also received a letter. Some coincidences are better kept as personal mysteries. Richard died 3 months later. I found out through an obituary in a city newspaper that Peter used to read. I didn't go to the funeral. There was no reason to. Our story had ended decades before in that yellow house by the roadside. And now, at 78, sitting on this porch, looking at the atelier I built, at the trees I planted, at the life I wove with my own hands, I can finally tell this story without pain accompanying every word. Time doesn't heal all wounds, as they say, but it teaches us to carry our scars with dignity. If Richard and Sarah taught me anything, it was this: that sometimes we need to lose everything to discover who we really are. That the most painful betrayal can be the gateway to the deepest freedom. That in the end, no one can break us completely unless we give them the pieces of ourselves. And so, dear viewers, I end my story, not with tears or resentment, but with the wisdom of someone who learned that our capacity to be reborn from the ashes is greater than any fire others may light in our path. If you liked my story, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to The Grandma's Diary. I would love to know where you're watching from, so leave your city in the comments, and if you have a story of overcoming to share, I'll be happy to read it. Thank you for listening to me today, for allowing this old lady to share such an intimate piece of her life with you. Until the next story,